Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be working kind of easy progressions into the primal core flow. Not getting into the core flow, but just kind of working up into some of the intro level progressions, grounding through the shoulders in the supine position, working on our spirals through our elbows, and getting some good core integration. It will be a little heavy on the wrists and the shoulders, especially in the first 15-20 minutes of the class. So go easy, be light, don't force it. If you are getting to a point with any of the movements where you're feeling pain, that's time to back off. Remember pain rules. I want to keep pain below a level 3 and that 1 to 2 slight discomfort. So if it's showing up on your face and you're making that pirate look, that means you're pushing it too far and you need to back off and move to the previous movement progression where you could do it without pain. So with all that, let's get started. So we're going to start in our quadruped, spreading hands nice and wide, grounding palms fully, and extending elbows. And from here, I want to start with just getting into some nice breath work, getting into our crocodile breath. Remember, crocodile breath, I want to breathe not just into the belly forward, but also into the side body and into the low back, that 360-degree balloon breath. So as we inhale in through the nose, see if you can feel that expansion full out all directions through that abdominal core on that inhale. You're really bringing that breath in fully. On the exhale, out through the mouth. And remaining nice and grounded through the palms. As you inhale, filling up that belly, notice how your pelvis may lightly want to tilt downwards. On the exhale, as you draw your navel in, the pelvis is going to want to kind of lightly scoop underneath. And with each of those breaths, we can slowly start moving in each direction, a little bit forward and a little bit back with the pelvis. See if you can start to feel some light mobilization into the low back. Maybe you get a little stretch. Same thing, breathing into the belly. Can you feel some stretch through the abdominal walls on that inhale as your pelvis is tilting forward? I want to make sure that we are avoiding pinch or pain in the low back. And as we're feeling that breath starting to open up the spine, we're going to allow that movement to start moving further up the spine, continuing to scoop and scoop. Feel that movement move up to the shoulders and press the palms into the floor. Feel the shoulders spread. As you inhale, bringing it all back, opening up that belly to the floor and feeling your sternum kind of reach down to the floor as your head comes up. We can continue to let that movement move up the spine. On that exhale, as you're drawing in, pressing through the hands, continue to let that movement move up over the top of the head, as if you're trying to touch forehead and tailbone to this imaginary place right here in the middle of your body, pressing fully into the floor. Can you feel your core kind of light up on fire? And then can you feel that wave moving from the pelvis, going up the spine till your head kind of comes up last. See if you can feel that nice wave-like action of the spine largely being generated from the pelvis, from the tailbone. Now I want to get into work on our circles from our cat-cow circles. So instead of just moving forwards and backwards through the spine, I want to bring the spine or the rib cage more into a circular pattern. We're going to start by just gliding side to side, specifically from the rib cage. We're still in our quadruped position. Still getting our nice inhale, exhale through our crocodile breath, but let that rib cage deviate out to the side and then to the other side. While we're doing this, I want to try to remain as still through the shoulders and the hips. So the hips and the shoulders are not shifting side to side. Your body weight should stay fairly evenly over both hands and both knees, but you're feeling that rib cage kind of lightly glide out side to side, and see if you can feel some kind of light little stretch through that side body around the rib cage, maybe a little bit into the lower back. And then as you're going side to side, once you go to one side, now we can come up into our scoop, reaching up to the ceiling, taking it all the way across to the other side, into our inhale, belly opens up to the floor, head comes up, and moving across to the opposite side. I like to imagine that the spine is a big jump rope, and I'm trying to get that rope to spin as big as possible. Although really, really slowly. I want to feel the edges of that circle. How does it feel through those outside aspects of the rib cage into that side body, low back? How does it feel with your breath, both the inhale and the exhale? And then we're going to reverse directions, doing the same thing, just moving in the opposite circle. Then we're going to come off the wrists, roll them out just a little bit. We can be in a deep crouch, you can be in a tall kneel, you can be sitting in a chair, you can be standing for this next position. My knees feel okay. I'm in a deep crouch for the time being. We're going to come into our bowls of soup. So I want to reach arms out, palms up, and I want to spread the hands as wide as possible. I'm trying to get the edge of my pinky as far away from the edge of my thumb. And I want to maintain as much of a pancake spread, so I don't want my hands to make a curve where my thumbs are, like I'm holding something. Super flat, like a pancake. Spreading out, reaching out to the side. We'll start with palms up, slowly spiraling one hand as far as you can, only spinning up to the shoulder. I don't want the shoulder blade to start moving up and down. So I'm getting as much rotation and spiral through the elbow, opening it all the way up and doing the same thing on the other side. Maintain the spread of your fingers throughout the movement. If you're finding that as you move, your fingers want to close or clench, try to spread and maintain that open hand. That may elicit some interesting stretches at the shoulder or at the elbow, especially as we take this into different progression. We're going to do some elbow circles, which will hopefully get into those elbows. With each one, we're really squeezing into that rotation. How much can you spiral without moving that shoulder blade up? And how much can you open that palm up to the ceiling and spiral in the opposite direction? How does this feel on the right shoulder, specifically at the socket of the shoulder compared to the left shoulder? Does one side spin or spiral a little bit better in that socket? Is it a little stiffer on one side? Can you go as far? Super useful information, especially if there's pain in the neck and the shoulders and the wrists or in the elbows. Go ahead and bring arms down. And now we're going to bring arms straight out in front. And we're going to start with one hand. So starting with just right hand, elbow is fully extended, palm is spread out wide. And I want to imagine that we've got a nice big bowl, again, bowl of soup, and I don't want to spill my bowl as I bring it all the way around up to my shoulder. And at this point, I get to spin my bowl and spiral it downward, and then extending all the way out. Want full extension of the elbow with full spread of the hands. If you have any kind of elbow tension, this should elicit a good stretch. And then as we spiral that hand over, again, feel into that elbow joint. Feel into that stretch. How much can you spiral? Bringing that bowl of soup back up to the shoulder and moving through that. The more you can maintain that spread hand, the more we're going to impact the muscles at the elbow joint and get those muscles to start kind of sliding and gliding a little bit better together to get some flow into them so that they're not so stuck and congested. And then we're going to reverse our directions. So as we go from our nice platter at the top, spiraling out, trying to keep from spilling it until we get that full extension. Again, this should elicit some stretch into the elbow if you have any kind of elbow wrist issue. Spiraling over, bringing it across, and then opening it back up. This part right here, nice extending, opening, spread hand. You may even feel some fatigue. And this is like, oh, I'm not really working very hard. But man, those muscles are starting to get a little, they're starting to talk to us. Let's go ahead and switch sides, doing the same thing. Arm straight out, nice bowl of soup. Opening it up, trying to bring that arm, trying to keep the wrist as straight as possible. Flipping it over at the shoulder. Extending it out as we get that elbow extension with that wrist spiral. Feel into that elbow joint. You may find that one side is a lot easier on this than the other side. I get a lot more stretch and fatigue on my right shoulder. My left shoulder, my left arm, there's parts of this where I really struggle with the neurology, especially as I spiral over and try to bring that elbow out to the side. I have some injury history on this shoulder, so I have some range of motion that I know that I really struggle maintaining. And then we'll reverse directions on this one as well. Spiraling the opposite direction, bringing it up, opening up to our bowl at the shoulder, and then nice open and extension as we reach away. Again, really try to feel into that elbow joint. And we'll shake the arms out. We're going to come back into our quadruped, spreading hands nice and wide. As we're getting into our hands, since we already got on our hands a little bit to begin with, and then we just did this spread bowls of soup, as we're coming back into quadruped, notice if there's a difference in how your hands feel as they're connecting to the ground. Do you feel more grounded? Can you feel more contact of all the of surface area of your hand, fingers, knuckles? Can you feel your elbows want to ground? And can you feel your shoulders kind of just a little bit more active? From here, we're going to get into our wrist mobility. So nice spread hands, lightly rocking forwards and backwards. Again, feeling into the wrist space. If you had an elbow that was tight on the circles, this is the wrist mobility is going to be really beneficial to kind of notice how does that same side wrist feel on that tight elbow. Turning fingers out to the side, moving side to side. I want to slow it down and come back and get back into our crocodile breath. Nice inhale, filling up that abdominal cavity. Exhale, drawing navel to spine. And let the slowness of that breath dictate how fast you're moving side to side. This does not need to be fast. In fact, the slower you go, the more you're going to feel that push and pull through the palm and through the shoulder blades. I want to feel that active shoulder blade sliding and gliding along the rib cage. We can turn our fingers all the way back to our knees. Closer the hands are, the less intense. The further out, the more intense. I don't want this to be super intense. Keeping the palms loaded, lightly rocking back hips to heels. and feeling into that wrist, that forearm space. Again, noticing if there's a difference from right side and left side, although in this particular movement, more than likely your dominant side hand will be a little denser and stiffer. That's not a terrible thing by itself, but if it's significant and noticeable, I want to pay attention to it. And if it's related to that elbow pain, I want to pay attention to it. Next, we're going to flip our palms upside down to the back side. Nice loaded on the back of the palms, starting with the elbows bent and working to press lightly to extend the elbows, seeing how much can we extend the elbows, paying attention if there's any stretch. Going back and forth, letting it bend and extending into it. Can you feel some of those similar stretches here that you felt in the elbow circles on our bowls of soup? If so, then these movements are movements that I suggest doing a little bit more of to help glide that area through, to work that wrist, elbow, shoulder complex together. We're going to come back into our quadruped, and the last part for our wrist is I want to work our elbow spirals, letting the elbows spiral as far forward as you can without moving at the hand. I want the hand to be nice and grounded. So we're getting that nice spiral feeling to any stretch around the wrist or in the shoulder, and then internally spiraling. As we're spiraling back and forth, I want to kind of notice how the position of my elbow changes the position of my shoulder blade. As I spiral my elbows in, the shoulder wants to kind of roll a little bit over the top of the ribs. Allow it to. See if you can feel some stretch in between the upper shoulder blades, just in between that upper space, simply by spiraling those elbows in and lightly pressing the palms into the floor in order to elevate the spine to the ceiling. As you spiral the elbow pits forward, notice how the shoulder blades want to roll back down and pack down onto your ribs and kind of tighten up, almost like they're being screwed into the rib cage. Allow that to happen. Feel that locking down mechanism of the shoulder blade, and then feel it release as you spiral internally and feel that stretch through the upper back. We're continuing to sink in our breath. I like to exhale. Really, we can play with our breath in both directions on here. We can inhale as we spiral the elbows out, exhale as we internally spiral and press, or you can reverse that. Inhale as you're pressing, exhale as you're spiraling forward. One of those may feel really comfortable and good. The other one may feel a little weird neurologically to the body. I like to groove breath work in kind of oppositionally in order to challenge the body. So if it's feeling too weird, just stick to what kind of feels comfortable for right now. All right, so now bringing the hands forward, getting into kind of our modified child's pose. Still spreading those hands as wide as possible. I want nice downward pressing hands, active elbows. I am actively pushing downward into the floor through my hands. Hips are over knees. I don't want to let those hips start dropping back unless you have shoulder pain and you need to adjust so that you're not putting too much pressure on the shoulders. From here, pressing down through the palms, we're reaching the sternum to the floor on the exhale. Inhale, we're coming up. Exhale, reaching down. I'm still kind of focusing on that nice crocodile breath. Inhale, exhale, filling up that abdominal space. As you inhale, notice how it kind of tilts the pelvis forward. On that exhale, allow that pelvis to scoop a little bit before you start reaching the sternum down, and see if you can maintain that scoop in order to help keep your rib cage from flaring out. I don't want to get this lumbar extension, well, thoracic lumbar extension with the rib cage sticking out. I want to try to maintain that rib. The way you're going to maintain it is through the pelvis. And if you're able to maintain that pelvic tilt or scoop as you're dropping down, you may feel a little bit more stretch into the shoulders. Notice if it's different on the left side compared to the right side, especially the side where you may have felt some tightness and tension at the elbow joint. On the next one, as we go down, we're going to stay down. And now I want to get into my push. I still got my downward pressing sticky hands. If I push my hands forward, they're going to slide my hips back and my shoulders come all the way up to the ears. Feel that nice stretch. And then pulling from the hands. Feel the shoulder blades slide back down. Don't let the elbows bend on this. Try to keep them actively straight, extended, and downwardly pressing. Feel the shoulder blades sliding up towards the ribs, down towards the hips. It's not a very big movement, but you may feel that it feels very big. It feels might feel a little stressful. It might be stressful on one shoulder compared to the other. I want to pay attention to that. I want to stay in that comfortable range with this. Then we'll come back up into our quadruped, and this will be the last bit on our wrists. Lifting the knees, we're going to get into our bear crawl. So I'm dropping my chest down to the floor, and I want to start to slowly reach one heel, extending that knee, like I'm trying to touch my heel to the floor. The heel does not have to touch, but we're reaching to the floor actively. And then bending that knee and extending the other knee, reaching that heel to the floor. With each one, as the knee that you're bending and softening with that foot, go ahead and lift that foot up. Spread the toes and the knuckles of your foot as wide as you can, and try to maintain that wide knuckle as you reach your heel to the floor. See if that kind of elicits any different levels of stretch through the calves, maybe into the back of the knee, maybe all the way up into the hamstrings. And then I want to start to slowly walk our feet forward. Kind of like moving my foot an inch forward, spreading those toes, reaching the heels. And then the next foot comes about an inch forward, spreading, and I'm slowly walking my feet up to my hands. I want to try to maintain my shoulder position as long as possible, but eventually I have to start to feel my hips and my shoulders shifting. I want to be in a position that feels safe. I don't want to fall on my head, so I'm only bringing this as far forward as I feel comfortable. Once you get there, however far it is, take a nice deep breath in, full exhale, and then we'll slowly start to walk back out. Doing the same thing. Spread the knuckles of the foot on each one. Reach that heel to the floor. As you're able to start shifting your weight back, dropping that chest more towards the floor. See how deep you can get. This will get you a little bit closer into that more down dog position, although I am not concerned about getting specifically into a down dog, but I want to get a nice length and stretch through the back of the legs. Then we'll bring our knees back down to the floor, and we're going to get into our shin box position. So shin box, got my hand at my hip, spiraling that elbow pit out. Feel that shoulder blade hack down. We're lifting up through the sternum, and we're going to start with our anterior hip. Inside of the knee is our pivot point, reaching that hip bone forward. Remember, this back hip has to be off the floor in order to reach and extend forward. And it's just this bony prominence of the hip that I'm trying to get moving forward. How much can I feel that stretch through the front of the hip? How tight does it feel? Can I move into it easily? Does it glide or does it feel stiff and clunky? Inhale as we soften. Exhale, crocodile breath, drawing navel into spine as you reach. Let's do 5 or 10 of these on this side. Really get a good feel, squeezing into it a little bit further on each one, and see if you can start to feel your glute tighten up just a little bit naturally based on the movement. And then we'll shin box across to the other side. Ground that palm, spiral the elbow, feel that sternum lift. Same thing on that back hip. Again, that back hip needs to be off the floor, and we're moving this bony prominence of the hip bone as far forward as you can without pain. Pivoting through that back knee. Right off the bat, does this side feel different? Is it tighter, more restricted, or does it move better? My left side is generally my stiffer side when it comes to this part of my hips. Although today, it's still definitely tighter. It's not as tight as it has been. So it actually feels a little bit loose compared to normal. Remember to keep that breath synced in. And then we'll switch back to the other side. And we're gonna do the exact same thing. Grounded palm, grounded shoulder, reaching into that hip extension. I really want to maintain this push through my knee in order to maintain my hip, but now we get to add our rotation. Like you got a piece of bread and you got a buddy right over your other shoulder that you're reaching towards to hand it off. Inhale, we're going to soften. We're going to come right back to pushing through that knee, reaching that hip forward. As we exhale, drawing navel into spine and rotation. The more you're able to sync these 3 distinctly different movements together, pushing through that knee to reach the hip bone forward being one of them. Exhale, drawing navel into spine being 2. And then this reach away, I'm trying to get my fingertips as far away from my knee, pressure in the floor. And I want to feel that nice rotational stretch from my hip through my spine all the way up into my shoulders. If you can sync those things together, this will elicit a really interesting stretch. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Grounded palm, grounded shoulder, bringing our breath in, exhale, reach that hip bone forward. Really focus on pressing into that knee, and then we can add in that nice rotation. Now, whichever hip felt tight on just the anterior hip, if you are maintaining that anterior hip pressure, that pressure through the knee and hip moving forward, this stretch is probably a lot harder coming up into the lower back into the shoulder. You may feel that stretch even more at the hip. I want to be in the nice juicy category of that stretch, moving in and out of it, being soft and playful with it, with the idea that each time I go, can I go a little further without forcing it? I want to be on the safe side of this, especially if this feels extremely tight. I have some good tension when I get into this space, man. It is super tight in that area, especially if you're able to maintain that pressure through the knee. Exhale, drawing navel into spine with that reach and rotation, getting the fingertips as far away from the knee as possible, eliciting as much of that segmental movement from knee to fingertips. Makes that a really lovely stretch. We're going to switch back to the other side, and now we're going to take our hand off the floor and bringing that hand up, bending the elbow. We're lifting the elbow up towards the ceiling, feeling that shoulder blade sliding up and down, similar to what we did in that child's pose position, but we're just working one shoulder at a time. I just want to feel that slide up and down. And then I want to start to feel that reach down into the hip as I lift up that shoulder. I want to see how much length can I get through the side of my body, from my hip moving down to my elbow moving up. However, I want to avoid too much side bend. I don't want to drop my opposite shoulder. Your opposite shoulder may drop lightly, but I want to avoid it. I want to get lift and reach through one side without dropping the other side. Can you open and extend, maintaining that other shoulder roughly in the same position without changing the range of motion, the position of your opposite side rib cage? Then we'll switch to the other side and do the same thing. Hand comes up, starting out with just feeling the shoulder blades lifting up and down. Nice slide. How does this feel differently compared to the other side? Is it more connected, less connected? Is it achy? Is it stiff? Does it slide well? Is it clunky? And we can start to add in, reaching through the hip, lifting up, trying to get as much length through that side body as possible. Continuing to breathe in as you drop, exhale, navel to spine on the reach. Again, I want to avoid dropping that opposite side. I don't want to go into side bend. I want to get long on one side without getting short on the other. And we're going to come back across and we're going to do the same movement again, and I'm going to add another layer to this. So as we come up, we got our two. We're reaching down and reaching up on that exhale. Inhale, letting it soften. What I want to add to it is we're going to bring back in the hip moving forward. So I want to really reach that hip moving forward, reaching through that knee, then pressing down as we press up all together. Inhale, let it soften. Exhale, hip goes forward, navel comes into spine as you press down and up, getting long on one side. Can you feel that stretch through that inner thigh, front of the hip, into the side body, up into the shoulder? And let's compare it then to the other side. So as we come back across, elbow comes up, reinitiating, press through that knee, hip bone moves forward, and then opposite side, reaching down and lifting up. Inhale, filling up the belly as we soften. Exhale, navel to spine. As that hip moves forward, as you get that nice length and reach through the opposite side. How does it feel differently on this side? Where do you feel the tightness and the restriction preventing this movement from being as full on one side compared to the other? And then we're going to come back to the opposite side. And now I want to get into our folds. With folds, we'll work our knee as the arrow. So my left knee is the arrow. I want to see how much can I square my chest to the floor. Can I reach my sternum roughly through the arrow of that knee? And then can I reach both hands through the arrow of that knee? And can I reach evenly? I don't want to push my reach. Once I get there, taking a nice inhale, exhale, reach a little further. On the next inhale, we're going to bring it all the way up and across to the other side. Doing the same thing. Squaring the sternum to the knee. Can you reach the sternum through that knee as much as possible? Can you reach both hands through that knee evenly? Taking a deep breath in, full exhale, reach a little further. We're going to go back and forth on this a good number of times. We'll spend a few good reps here, keeping our hips in the same position, but just lightly exploring. Each one, I want to see if I can reach a little further. Can I spread my sternum a little bit more over my knee? Can I keep that nice rotation? Can I get a nice smooth transition across from one side to the other? And then when I go to the other side, does it feel similar or does it feel dissimilar from the other side? And if it feels dissimilar, in what way? Do you feel it in the glute? Do you feel it in your low back? Do you feel it in the shoulders? Do you feel it in the back hip? The slower we go, keeping this kind of really synced to that crocodile breath, will allow us to get a little bit more input as far as what are we feeling within the body as we move from one side to the other. I want to get those awarenesses up because where we feel tension patterns related to a lot of these stretches that are different on one side compared to the other aren't going to be incredibly relevant. Even to the stuff of elbow pain, wrist pain, neck pain. We're working in our hips right now, but it's all related. So I need to have a really good assessment, awareness assessment of how these movements feel side to side. And the slower we go, the better for that. Now, as we're moving side to side, we can start to open up the hips, getting a little bit more splay between, not necessarily staying in the same position. And we no longer have to just use the knee as the arrow. You can open up that range of stretch. You can move more forward. You can move more through that knee. You can even go back on the opposite side of that knee. As long as you're not moving into pain, and whatever you're doing on one side, make sure you're doing the same thing on the other side so that you can compare. And it's okay to do all three of those movements on each side at a time. Reaching forward, reaching to the knee, and then reaching back. If you feel anything like a specific position of this open shin box, getting into this open position, if one side feels distinctly different than the other side, then I would do that position of your hips a few times back and forth to see if you can get them to feel a little bit more similar than dissimilar. I don't want to just do them and move on if there's something that's particularly interesting. Because if there's something particularly interesting in the sense that it's different on one side compared to the other, that's a big deal because I'm going to be spending my day moving with that difference. And right now we have a little bit of an opportunity to get some better balance into those movements so that we get better movement through the rest of our day. Last little bit, we'll continue to open up that hip as much as we can, getting closer into our what we'd call pigeon pose and moving side to side with that. Again, going slow and connecting it with breath and feeling the difference on one side compared to the other. Each time we change position, you may feel a different layer of imbalance between one side and the other. And it's possible that when your hips are closer together, you're feeling a greater imbalance on the right side than the left side. And then as you open your hips up, that reverses because we're getting into different muscularity of the hips. And just because one muscle in one hip is tight doesn't mean all of them are. So you can have interesting combinations of imbalances within both hips. So I want to pay attention to those kind of things. All right, so now we are going to get on our back. Laying on, bringing feet up, knees bent. I want to keep the knees fairly tight to the chest. I don't want to get to 90 degrees at the hips or more open than that. Bringing the knees in will help keep the low back flat to the floor. If this position is uncomfortable on the back, if there's some back pain, it's okay to have the feet on the floor to go through this movement. I'm going to teach it from here. I'll try to come back and show what we can do with the feet on the floor. So next, spreading arms out to the side with the palms up. I want to feel as much spread through the upper back. I want to feel as much contact grounding into the floor. I'm kind of pressing hands down, pressing elbows down. This is where I want to imagine we're laying on a bed of sand and we're trying to make a really good imprint of our upper back. Although right now, next, as we're feeling that spread, we're going to draw our elbows in towards our spine, keeping the elbows on the floor and our wrists on the floor to the best that you can. See how much can you bring those elbows in, maintaining that spread upper back. So if you're bringing your elbows in and it brings your shoulders up off the floor, you're bringing them in too far. Keep the shoulders spread, chest is open. As you bring those elbows in, bring them in as tight as you can, maintaining wrist contact to the floor. From here, we're going to get into our hip rotations, allowing the hip to rotate over to the left side and over to the right side. Slowly going back and forth. This is where I want to maintain our imprint in the sand. So I don't want to move so far with my hips that my shoulders start to slide around or lift up off the floor, because then I'm going to smear my sand print. If you have your feet on the floor, just try to keep your knees and your ankles stacked. So as you roll your hips over one side, you're going to roll onto the outside edge of that foot. The other leg is just lightly attached. That foot should not stay in contact with the floor. It has to be lifted off the floor in order to keep your knee and your ankle and your foot together. And you're just doing the same thing, seeing how much can you rotate without pain and without losing that spread of the shoulders. With the legs up, we can continue to slowly reach into that rotation a little bit more. But again, only going as far as you can without smearing your sand. Notice if it's easier to go to the left side compared to the right side. Which way do you have more tension? Which way do you have more range of motion? We're going to keep our shoulders in that same position. Elbows are a little bit tight, but your feet can now come down on the floor. And I want to about flat feet. We're going to get into that nice tripod foot. I want feet softly grounded for right now. I don't want to push into them. We're going to come right into our breath. Filling up through the belly, exhale, drawing navel into spine. We're going to add in our pelvic tilts to this. So as you inhale, filling up the belly, pelvis tilts forward, spine will lightly lift off the floor. On the exhale, drawing navel into spine, and you're feeling that light scoop. I want to get that light scoop without pushing into my feet. So I don't want my pelvis lifting up in order to feel that scoop. It's the breath. Breath is pushing my pelvis forward, and then my belly is drawing the tailbone in. See if you can maintain that light grounded foot on the inhale and exhale. Notice if there's any tension, like around the solar plexus, especially on that exhale as you're maintaining your grounded shoulders position. If you have any stretch or tightness, tension in the chest, these are things we want to notice, because if this feels tight, we want to get some opening up here. We want to improve the mobility so that we can improve your ability to breathe. Now we're going to start to get our feet integrated into the grounding. So as you exhale, scoop, continue to scoop and start to press into the feet and feel your pelvis peel off the floor, and it's going to peel each vertebrae one at a time as you continue to exhale
We're driving that hip bone up towards the ceiling, and I want to feel that stretch through the front of the hips like we did in our shin box. And then as we inhale, we're letting each vertebrae down one at a time, seeing if we can even set them one at a time at the L1, L2, L3, L4, L5 before the sacrum comes to the floor. Sacrum comes to the floor, hip belly opens up towards the ceiling, and then we exhale, feeling that spine press into the floor, and then peeling it up one at a time. You may notice it's easier to peel up one at a time and to feel relatively good segmental contact as you peel each vertebrae up. However, going back down, as you get to your L1, because we have a lordotic curve, it's curved in the opposite direction. It's a little harder to get L1, L2, L3, L4, and L5, especially those last ones, to touch without the sacrum. We're reaching them to the floor. We're trying to get them there. It's not a big deal if they don't. There's a natural curve there. It's a very hard position to move into, but I do want to try to encourage that movement. I want to improve that mobility of that lumbar flexion, especially related to our breath. As we're doing this, kind of come back and check in with your shoulders, your upper body. Are you still maintaining your pressure in the sand? I don't want to get soft and loose. We're active in the shoulders as we're driving up those hips. And then the last little bit I want to add to this, this might get to where we're going into a little bit of advanced work, especially if you have any shoulder pain, neck pain, low back pain. As we drive the hips up, I want to maintain hips elevated. Again, we're active in our shoulders. Wrists are on the floor, elbows are on the floor, and we're spread. We're going to initiate that drive through one side. I'm pushing into my right shoulder, downward into the floor in order to lift my left shoulder, and I'm seeing if I can rotate my left shoulder over the top of my right shoulder. And then can I bring it back down, and can I drive that opposite shoulder and lift the right shoulder up. Go slow on this. Keep your breath connected. As you're driving a shoulder down, I want to make sure that we're trying to keep our hips pressing up. So I don't want my hip to drop down as I roll over. I'm keeping that driving nature, seeing if I can maintain that as I reach my shoulder down. I'm still pressing both feet firmly, lifting both hips firmly. I also want to check into our head and neck. My head is in contact with the floor, but I am not putting pressure through my head. I'm not trying to push into the floor. So the neck and the head should feel kind of light on this movement, not getting a lot of pressure directly into the head and neck. We'll go ahead and let the hips back down. And now we're going to move on to our belly. We're going to start with arms are going straight out to the side with the palms down. And then we're going to pull those elbows in, spiraling the palms up. And I want to bring my elbows into my side body. I'm not lifting up to get my arms underneath me. My chest is on the floor. As I spiral them in, my elbows coming into the side of my ribs. I want to feel that placement so that I can move my chest to the floor or lift it up, right? I'm not going to lay on top of my arm. I have plenty of space of the floor to navigate. My arms are more to the side, but when I come down, my elbows are lightly touching the sides of my rib cage. I'm going to give you two options for your legs. One is we can bend the knees and keep the feet up towards the ceiling, or we can plant the toes, actively lift the knees, and get really active in our glutes. We're gonna do it, we're working into our plank from this position. So I'm gonna start with elbows or knees actively lifting to the ceiling so that you feel your glutes engaged. I wanna feel those glutes super engaged all the way through the movement. From here, we're going to spiral our palms down, and as we spiral down, we're pressing elbows into the floor, driving, lifting our body up, and then we're going to spiral our palms back up, pulling our body back to the ground. Elbows should be in contact with the side of the ribs. Exhale, spiral, press. Inhale, spiral, pull. Listen to the word pull. I'm not dropping my body to the floor. I am pulling my body to the floor, and I'm pulling my elbows to my ribs. I push away and I'm pulling back. I have gravity as an assistance on that pull, but I am not relying on gravity. If you need to do this on knees, try to keep the glutes active as well. I want to feel them kind of squeeze because that's going to help to keep your core engaged as you press and drive up and pull to come right back down. That may be really good work for most of you. This next part might be getting into a lot more, especially if you have some imbalances in the shoulders or you got some shoulders pain. We're going to start working on rolling from one side to the other. So everything is still the same. I'm down on the floor in my palms up, active knees lifting up. And I want to spiral just through one side to press. And then I'm going to unspiral and press to the other side. I'm not actually lifting my body up off the ground. I'm simply rolling my body from one side through to the other side, staying in a very low position. Palm spiral up as I come to the center. One palm spirals down as I roll onto the opposite elbow. As we come to the center, chest should be on the floor, elbows are touching side ribs, but as we push away, we're spiraling our body onto the other forearm. And since it's in that side ribcage space, it should kind of be nestled in a position that's not uncomfortable. If it's right here in front of the chest, there's usually things in the front of the chest that make that a very difficult position to maintain. So I want to keep that elbow more through the side so that we can roll over the top, roll off of it, and still be in a comfortable position. So if that was feeling good and we're ready for the next part, we're going to elevate that. So from the floor, palms up, active knees, press and reach to the floor. Now we're going to see if we can pull just to one side, keeping the other side active and extended. So from our active plank, spiraling one palm up and pull that elbow so that it's coming into that same nestled spot on the side of your rib. And then see if you get that elbow to that rib, you ought to be able to roll all the way and touch the outside of the shoulder. And then come back, pressing it back out. Same thing on the other side. Pull that elbow in, bring that shoulder to the floor. Pressing it back out. I want to keep the hips active. You're actively lifting the knees. As you spiral down, shoulder touches, hips, knees, everything else stays off the floor. So you're still maintaining your plank, even as you're moving from low position to high position. Let's go ahead and get into a nice, comfortable seated position. And we can bring, want to make our nice C-shaped hands, pressing them into our side body.
I want to putting our hands underneath our 12th rib and above our pelvic bone or pelvis into that nice, soft, meaty space. And I want to squeeze on the exhale. As we take an exhale, drawing navel to spine, feeling that breath draw in, we're going to let our hands squeeze together. And this is where I want to feel that contact of the index finger in the rib or in the abdominal space, the side of the palm pressing into the side body, and our thumb in the back pressing into those low back muscles. And we're going to breathe in to our crocodile breath. I want the active breath to push all 6 points of contact out and away as evenly as possible. On the inhale, we're filling it up, pressing out. On the exhale, drawing it in, navel to spine. Inhale, actively pressing those hands out. As you're breathing in, expanding outward. Notice if there's one of those points or one side that does not expand, it doesn't have a lot of activity to it. Bring the focus of your breath into that space and see if you can get it to move. Kind of like a flashlight. You're shining some light and seeing if you can get that space to start opening it up with your breath. And if you can get it to open up, then see if you can start to balance it out with the other side. And get a good 5, 6 full breaths. In as big as you can, full exhale, out as you can. Notice the position of your hips and your spine and your shoulders. As you inhale, allow it to lift you tall as you're expanding out. And as you exhale, let your pelvis lightly soften and scoop, and your shoulders lightly round, and your head can droop. Allow the inhale to make you tall again. On the next inhale, we can take our hands off our side and let them fall comfortably into a comfortable position. Now as the next few breaths, as you're breathing in, allow that breath to come up into the shoulders and into the neck. Feel any tension, restriction in the neck, shoulder area. You can even get some light neck mobility as you're breathing into it. On the inhale, breathe into the tension. On the exhale, imagine that exhale breath is a waterfall and it's just rinsing that tension off your body. See how much you can just let go on the exhale. On the inhale, we're going to breathe into whatever tension is left. And then on the next exhale, let that rinse off as well. This is a good place to spend a minute or 2 or 5 or 10. Just nice, slow, synced breaths, feeling into the body, noticing tension, noticing restriction, and letting it melt away. When you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes.